been wanting to bring you the sound of the wind for a while. We've had some lovely storms here in New York recently, and the house on the Wine Forest farm sits up on a hillside that faces west, the direction that nearly all the storms come from here. So when it blows, I feel the old bones of the house creaking and rocking, and outside the wind hisses in the dead grass, leaps over stone walls, escapes the grasp of the clawing oaks, and screams through the spruce. It's always the witching season here, and these chilling winds seem to enchant the flavors of wine and cast a spell over a dark night. Welcome to Beyond Organic Wine. I'm Adam Huss. Beyond Organic Wine is a podcast and Substack about the ecology of wine. The premise of this podcast is that the way we grow and produce wine would benefit from being guided by the same love and values with which we drink it. If you like to support this podcast and the work that goes into each episode, please subscribe at the Beyond Organic Wine Substack at beyondorganicwine.substack.com. And you'll also get full access to all the podcasts, resources, and writing that happens there. If you'd like to contact me for any reason, please email me at connect@organicwinepodcast.com. And last, but definitely not least, please support and follow and leave a great review on your podcast app. It's immensely helpful. Thank you so much for your support, and thanks to those of you who already support and subscribe. It's immensely helpful. Couldn't do it without you. Only 1 week left for discounted early bird tickets to Embracing Hybrid Grapes in California. You can get tickets and more info at embracinghybridgrapes.com. Early bird ticket sales end after November 15th, 2025. And we've been announcing a few of our amazing keynote speakers on the Embracing Hybrid Grapes Instagram, which please follow if you don't. Keynote speakers, presenters, panelists include Elaine Chuckin-Brown, Christopher Renfro, Deirdre Heekin, Matt Neese, and more to be announced. So again, Embracing Hybrid Grapes in California, January 26, 2026. Tickets and more at embracinghybridgrapes.com. Wine Enthusiast recently published an article by Kate Dingwall titled, "As Wine Production Plummets in California, Small Producers Seize the Moment." While the sentiment of, it's a shame to let a tragedy go to waste is great, and this massive reset in wine gives us an opportunity to realign wine production with sustainable, climate-smart values, all good parts of the sentiment of this article, there was a huge gaping hole in that, in all of its discussion of replanting with better adapted varieties of grapes and future-proofing vineyards, it makes not a single mention of hybrid grapes. Unfortunately, this is the situation in California. Because of prejudice and because it's so easy to grow vinifera here generally, we don't even consider hybrid grapes when the opportunity to plant them stares us in the face. We're still talking about rootstocks, row orientations, technology improvements, and shuffling our deck of a few vinifera varieties. We're falling behind other parts of the world who must rapidly adjust to the extremes of climate change. We might become the leader in climate-smart technology, but we're going to be 20 years behind the rest of the wine world in terms of actually adapting our viticulture. We will be in a situation soon of adopting varieties of grapes that were bred in Europe with our own North American grape species genetics, and paying royalties to Entav Inra or Geisenheim for every vine that we plant as just a reminder of our folly. It might seem bold or even a bit crazy at this point to replant and rebrand with hybrids now, but in 20 years we're going to look back and wish we had planted more. My guest for this episode is George Gale. George has led a double life. On the surface, George presented a public facade as a philosopher of science, American historian, professor, and author. He was a PhD student at UC Davis and wrote his dissertation at Oxford. He has a Wikipedia page, spent 43 years as a professor of science and philosophy at University of Missouri, Kansas City, and published multiple papers and books on the philosophy of science, the Big Bang Theory, the anthropic principle, the philosophy of modern cosmology, and the many worlds theory, among many other topics. But George has also had another life, a dark and mysterious one. Outside of the classrooms and lecture halls of academia, George grew hybrid grapes. Not only did he grow them, he fell in love with them, made wine with them, and even hybridized some of them. For decades, George has had a secret affair with Leon Millot, Villard Blanc, and many other outcast grapes. After decades of secrecy, George tells all in this scandalous interview. Well, sort of. George wrote a book that turns out to be the book on the Phylloxera crisis. Without knowing this history, I think many of us in wine take a lot of how things are for granted. But George's book, Dying on the Vine, gives an amazing historical perspective on how phylloxera shaped the world that we live in today in ways much larger than just how we grow wine. Phylloxera became a catalyst for big science in the sense of international collaborative science that is tied up in national and international politics and economics. It was a cultural trauma that caused mass global population migrations that affect our cultures still. And it was one of the main drivers of hybridization in grapes that led to some of the enduring varieties that we still drink today and use for further grape breeding efforts. But there was a dark side to all of this. Anti-American prejudice festers in the subtext of this history and informs the wine world we inhabit. George gives us an overview of this history and even more of the details of the fascinating elements that still influence our wine culture now. This broad and deep look into the history of hybrids gives us insight into human nature, globalization, and the future of wine. Enjoy. George, welcome, and thanks for being on the Beyond Organic Wine podcast. I really appreciate this.
Sure, glad to be here.
So I think the big picture thing, I just want to jump right in. I will try to give you somewhat of an amazing introduction before this. But I just want to jump right in because I think you have so much to share. I think the big picture idea that I'd love to get is a historical sense of how hybrids have functioned in wine, historically up until today. And let's just start back in the 19th century. You wrote a book, which I would argue is the book on the Phylloxera crisis, or whatever we want to call it, ecological disaster.
Tragedy, disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all of those things.
Right. Dying on the Vine is the name of the book. And can you just sort of start, talk us through that? Like, what was life like before that, and what was like, what happened?
It was very, very interesting the way it happened. There had been basically no real problems with grapes and wine on the Eurasian continent forever, up until I guess it was about 1840, when a new disease hit. And that disease turned out to be a disease that got imported from the New World. And because this was the first appearance of this disease in the Eurasian grape world, it just beat up on the Eurasian grapes something terrible. And so this was the very first experience with the grape growers and vintners and so on in Eurasia and in Europe in particular, with a real scourge of a disease. And it took them quite a while, from 1840 into the 1860s, to learn how to deal with it. And this was when the first pesticide, the Bordeaux mix, was discovered.
And what was that disease?
It was powdery mildew.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, and then later on, black rot came in.
Right.
So both of those just were ferocious. So the Europeans sort of knew that there could be problems on a wide scale. But what happened in the late 1870s was vines went into decline down in the Rhone area. And they went into decline in a very particular way. In the center of a vineyard, a few vines would decline. They would get the leaves would go dry, and then the vines would ultimately die. And then the diseased area would spread out like an oil spot, very much like an oil spot. And these symptoms were noted, and there were two schools of thought at first about what was going on. Some people, the dominant model was that the disease was some kind of a breakdown in the vines themselves, like an allergy or something on that kind of a model, against an environmental cause. And this was the dominant model of disease, both in plants and in animals and humans. The
Mm.
notion that an internal breakdown uh, would be invaded by some kind of a cause in the environment. Really bad weather for plants, freezes of a certain sort, and so on. But a minority of scientists at the time, also in human medicine, were taken by Pasteur's work, in which he proposed that disease, in fact, was an active invasion by a causal agent from the environment itself
Mm.
that took down the plant, and it wasn't resolved. It wasn't a result of a weakness in the plant itself. So these were two views of disease that were available at the time, with the Pasteurian view being the minority view. So when this disease started to hit and the vineyards started to die, all sorts of proposals about what to do, mostly involving changing the environment of the vines, were were carried out, and
Mm.
they made absolutely no difference at all.
Right.
But one of the Pasteurian scientists, a professor named Planchon from Montpellier, was put on a committee by a local agricultural society, and he and two others went out and pulled up a vine that was sick but wasn't dead yet. And on the roots, they found an almost microscopic bug, thousands and thousands of them on the roots. And Planchon and his colleagues proposed that this bug was a Pasteurian agent, causal agent, coming in from the environment and weakening the vine and ultimately killing it. And so for the next 7 years, it was a scientific controversy
Hmm.
about which one of these theories was correct, whether it was something in the environment that was weakening a vine. So the phylloxera was coming to the vine only after it had been weakened from its own internal weaknesses, or whether the phylloxera itself was the cause. So they were called the phylloxera effect uh,
Hmm.
theory and the phylloxera um, cause theory.
Mm.
And after 7 years, it was finally decided that it was the phylloxera was the cause. And so then all sorts of different proposals were made: kill the phylloxera, protect the vine, uh, and it. I don't know how detailed you want to get, but it just went on and on and on. Finally, it was decided that since phylloxera had come from America, that the solution, one way or another, was going to come from America, and
Yeah.
this raised hell among the French minds, because they did not like the notion that the cause was also going to be the cure, namely America. So the first thing that was tried was to bring in all sorts of American vines like Concord and things like that, which of course they hated, because Concord wine was not like Cabernet Sauvignon at all. Another thing that was tried, they finally started trying grafting, putting the American roots on the in the ground, with the French grape grafted onto the top. And after 20 years of experimentation, they finally made that work. But it was,
Wow.
yeah, no, it took a long time because there were all
Yeah.
sorts of problems.
I
The
mean, I
the
just this
the
time frame of everything. Like, I don't know how much people realize, because we all, everybody in wine just sort of takes our understanding and
oh
all the methods for granted. But like that
it took
is
it took 35, 40 years before things got really straightened out. I mean, it was a long, arduous procedure.
that's crazy. I mean, that's like a whole lifetime for some wine
Oh
growers,
yeah, I
right?
mean, some of these scientists spent that. I mean, this was their entire career.
Wow.
The French soils were so different from ours. It took a trip. Uh, 20 years after the grafting had first been discovered, it took a trip to the States and a visit to what's his name, to not to Munson down in Texas
Yeah.
before they found the one small area in the United States that had a grapevine that could stand the soil in most of the southwest of France.
Right. Right.
So it was only when they found that grapevine,
Which one was that? That was Berlandieri.
the Glandieri, and this was
Yeah.
in '93.
Wow.
So I mean, this was 20 years after the disease was discovered. So
Right.
it took a long time to get all these things worked out. And hybridization was first proposed in '83 at Montpellier. Sorry, no, at Bordeaux, at the University of Bordeaux. And Bordeaux and Montpellier were rivals all throughout this whole time. So you had scientific rivalry was also complicating things uh, because Bordeaux went for hybridizing as a way of getting the American solution into the European vineyards, namely
Right.
actually getting the American genes into the European grapes rather than physically putting the American vines onto the grafting onto the European vines, which was the solution that Montpellier was in favor of. And of
Right.
course, at first, Montpellier, and for the longest time, Montpellier's solution won because it turned out that hybridizing was a long, involved, slow, complicated procedure.
Right. Right.
Uh, because it turned out that the disease resistance came across easily enough, and it was easy in the first generation of a cross between a European vine and an American vine. It was easy enough to get the phylloxera resistance, but the wine quality was not there. It was
Right.
still it was still too much. The wine was still much too American. So there were the notion that hybridization could work was accepted, but it was also foreseen that it was going to be really difficult to do. For example, one of the very first hybridizers, Maurice Bacco,
Yeah.
apparently made over 50,000 crosses. And if you've ever tried to cross a grapevine, it's a really arduous process. You've got to get in there and fiddle around with this little tiny flower blossom and take off the masculine parts so that you can take the pollen from the American vine or whatever and put it on the European vine. And this you've got to have it's like microsurgery. And to do this 50,000 times, it's just
I imagine him with like big Coke bottle glasses by the
oh
time he
yeah,
was
oh
like
yeah, right.
50.
I mean, first you got to be able to see the damn thing before you can eviscerate the masculine parts. So, but Baco ultimately made a couple of really successful crosses. A white called, interestingly enough, Baco Blanc, and it is still approved and is still used mostly for the production of
Cognac?
of cognac or well, yeah, I guess both cognac and armagnac it's allowed in the production of.
Okay.
Uh, it doesn't make a very good straight wine
Uh-huh.
because it still has a bit of a Concordy kind of nose to it,
Oh,
but
really?
yeah,
Hmm.
it's not very viniferish. I mean it's pretty viniferish, but it's got a little bit of raspberry in it, as the French call it,
Right,
framboise.
right, right.
Uh, but it's got really good acidity. It's very productive, and it makes a very nice spirits. And in the reds, Baco Noir came in, and Baco Noir was an immediate success. And it turned out to be very, very uh, congenial everywhere, nearly everywhere in wine growing France. So, and its flavors were very similar to, not exactly the same as the regular vinifera, but close enough and interesting enough that it was adopted and planted quite widely.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that
It
that
doesn't have Labrusca at
No,
least as a dominant note, right?
it's got no framboise flavors to it at
Right.
all, and it's I can't remember what the cross is, but I think it's just Riparia.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
what I thought. Yeah, I think
I don't think there's
if
any
we
little.
both think that, maybe we're right.
Yeah, but one thing I should mention is that some of the actual American grapes that were brought over, for example, Norton and Jacques
Hmm.
and a couple of others, were in fact very successful. The French loved Norton,
Yeah.
but it turned out that its its soil requirements were the same as high quality vinifera requirements, and it
Mm,
was hard to root. So it got beat out by the grafted ones.
got
But
it.
uh, Black Spanish or Jacques and Herbemont and some of the others,
Also known as Lenoir, I think,
yeah,
Jacques.
also known as Lenoir, right?
Okay.
Uh, they carved out a niche, especially in the rural areas, because they were reliable, they were disease resistant, and their wine was pretty good. I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't. I mean, I've had some of the Jacques that is still being made. It's been given an exception, and well, now it's now fully legal again,
Right.
and it's pretty damn good. I mean,
Yeah.
it's better than Blanc. Uh, so
Yeah.
so there were good reasons that it hung on. And Lucy Morton, with her historical work and the movie that she's done, has been to some of these villages where they are still hanging on to the old Jacques and the Herbemont and some of the others
Right.
and some of the old winemaking techniques. So they're still there.
Right. Well, let me ask you something about phylloxera before, we plow on with that. But it just occurred to me, we we live in a world where a scientific debate, or I don't know if it's actually scientific, and that's kind of my question, uh, happens about these things that maybe are beyond the realm of direct perception. So I'm talking
Mhm.
specifically about climate change.
Uh-huh.
So we're modeling these things and we're basing them on, tons of evidence that we've gathered over the last half century, and beyond, and then, but our predictions about them are models, and
Right.
and so people debate them, but we all know that the majority of that debate actually comes from sort of corrupt motives. Like, it comes from people who don't want to change, or don't want to change as fast, or don't want to defund their political donors, those kinds of things. Was any
Yes.
of that happening with
That's a
um
that's a
the phylloxera thing? Was there any kind of corruption in these two camps? Like, was anybody, like, you know I don't know, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
was
no.
there?
That's a really good question. I had no, as far as I know, no, as far as I know, it was what it was. What there is always a commitment among scientists as much as anybody else. There's always a commitment to the theory that you favor, and you're always reluctant to give it up, even in the face of evidence.
Right.
And so there was surely noticeably some of that going on. And there was some ill will. Um, for example, here's something that happened. The Bordeaux, there was an important ag society in Bordeaux that was reporting every few months on what was going on. And they were fairly neutral, although they did favor the phylloxera effect uh, scenario. The group from Montpellier sent a crew over to investigate two areas in Bordeaux without notifying the people in Bordeaux. And they showed up, investigated the two areas in Bordeaux, and then made a report again without talking to the people in Bordeaux.
Hmm.
And the society immediately went full bore uh, against them, against that theory.
Right.
So uh, it was
Well,
a
let me.
really a kind of a vicious attack, and
Gotcha.
it was purely spiteful because
Right.
because they felt that their their uh, their territory had been had been invaded.
So, and the other thing I wanted to just, I don't know if it's more of a comment, but well, no, it's a question. I have loved hearing you, as somebody who's talked about these things for a long time, say things like, they didn't like Concord because it wasn't like Cabernet, and the quality was too American, and it had a raspberry flavor, and you're avoiding using words that are pejorative in all of that if people pay attention. And I wonder to what extent you would have a comment about that, in terms of, like, saying something is not like Cabernet doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that somebody might have a preference. And, some other people might really love Concord,
Well,
and might like it a lot better than Cab. Maybe some Americans would feel that way. And to say that a quality is too American, it doesn't say it's negative. It just is a different kind of quality than what French people were used to. So I'm just, yeah, I don't know. Do you have a comment about that kind of sense of?
not only do I have a comment about it, I've written 3 papers about it, and
Oh,
one in the American Philosophical Quarterly that was quoted by Amarine and Joslin in their book Wines: A Sensory Analysis. And I've been gotten in real contretemps with uh, 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 the American Journal of Aesthetics about it. I distinguish between saying this is good wine and I like this wine.
yes.
And I like this wine is to report a psychological fact and an emotional fact about yourself. To say this is good wine is to report an objective fact about the wine itself. And I don't want to go into it, but I have worked out ways that I can specify what I mean by this is a good wine. And as one of my attackers said, Dr. Gale's fine, well balanced wine. Well, yes, I mean, if the pH is 1, it's not a good wine. And I can say all sorts of things like that. So a really well made Concord wine can be. Well, okay, I'll tell you a story. I was in uh, Trieste a few years ago, and the guidebook said go to this restaurant because it's the neatest restaurant in Trieste. The owner has his own vineyard, and he does all his own. He makes all his own wine, and his food is great. So we go to this restaurant, and indeed the food was good, and I got to talking to him, and I didn't speak any Italian, but he spoke German, and I'm fluent in German. So we're talking, and I tell him I'm a winemaker, and all of a sudden he starts pulling all his wine out, and geez, we just got really drunk. And uh, after the meal was over, he says, "And here's my favorite wine," and he brings us an after dinner wine, and it's this unctuous purple stuff, and I taste it, and it's Labrushka, full and clearly
Right.
sweet and lovely.
Right.
And I said, "What is this?" And he says, "It's Clinton." And I, what? Clinton? And I finally figured out it's Clinton.
Right. Right.
Because there's Clinton, there's still Clinton planted every house in Greece has got that has a grapevine has got a Clinton or an Othello or something like that growing up the side, and every farm has got in Greece has got an arbor with and every pub has got an arbor with some late model Labrushka, like Clinton or Othello or something like that growing.
Right.
So and and they've just uh, approved in Austria the I can't think of the name for a moment,
Oh,
but they
Uhudler.
yeah Juhudler,
Yeah.
and it's been reapproved now,
All
so
right.
it can be
Yeah.
it can be sold because
Right.
they say, look at this is a traditional wine. It goes back 120 years,
Yeah.
and they say it's made from Isabella, which is quite probably right. Isabella makes a lovely wine.
Yeah.
Um, I mean,
I,
come on. If the wine is well made,
yep.
you
There.
it's if there are good qualities about it that are worth make it worth drinking. I
Yeah,
mean,
they're petitioning to get it accepted as a traditional variety on the Azores now, where it's been grown for, illegally, like you said, for 120 years or something like that.
yeah, oh yeah, and
Um,
and of course Italy, it's still made a lot in Italy and grown illegally, and it'll probably get reapproved in Italy.
yeah, apparently growing all around the Black Sea too. It's
Oh
huge.
yeah, and it's I've had it in Slovakia.
Okay, gotcha. Nice. Have you
Yeah.
had any South American versions of it? I hear it's big in Brazil and
Oh yeah. No, Lucy says it's there's two or three provinces in Brazil where it's the dominant wine. No, I haven't.
yeah, me either. But excited to try.
Yeah.
So there, I'm guessing. So coming back to Phylloxera, I'm guessing with these two different camps of grafting versus hybridizing. Obviously, grafting sort of became the dominant one. That allowed them to retain their familiar flavors. While still capitalizing on the ecological benefits of having North American rootstock.
Right.
Um, what happened then? I mean, I've heard statistics that somewhere between like 32 to 40% of French vineyards were hybrids in as late as the mid 1950s. And my assumption has been like what your story is told, which is there was a crisis. Hybridizing and incorporating these grapes was an urgent need, and people didn't have a prejudice against them. They just saw them as a way of saving European wine cultures. And so they started using them and they caught on, and people started saying, like, people were growing things like Clinton and Othello and Isabella, and they were like, these are productive, they're low risk, they're they're interesting flavors, they're new things that we haven't
Right.
explored. Like, if you're a farmer, it seems like a no-brainer, right? Like, to grow
Oh yeah.
these things.
Absolutely.
And then it
And
was probably, but then my guess is that World War II came along, and afterwards we had a way of keeping vinifera viable despite its comparative, fragility next to these hybrids with chemistry. And so the French saw an opportunity to now sort of enforce their vinifera culture uh, with chemicals. Is that
that
fair?
that's fair. Uh,
Okay.
because there's always been prejudice.
Okay, there was always prejudice.
There's always has been prejudice against the vines because they've got American blood. That's,
I see.
that's
I see.
just I mean, the Germans were quite clear about it. Uh, the Germans thought of hybrids as, again, an example of miscegenation.
Right. Right.
So they eliminated the hybrids
That's
with
funny.
no uncertain terms. The French thought that because they had American blood in them, no matter how they presented sensually, they theoretically, genetically, they were second rate.
Yeah.
I mean, it was that kind of a. It didn't
Right.
matter what they tasted like.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
the fact that they didn't have the prestige. And after the war, as you say, they. I mean, Phil Wagner used to make the point. He said, "Look, during the war, all the vinifera all died,
Right. Right.
and the hybrids sailed merrily along."
Right.
And after the war, when the chemical industry quit making gunpowder and started making chemicals again, uh, the vinifera had a lease on life, and the French government decided that it was time to get back in the export business of prestige wines. So they had two or three pogroms, uh, and I guess the last big one was in '68, and they offered huge rewards uh, to uproot the hybrids. And so, if you look at the curves of a number of acres planted, I think VB at one point had something like, gosh, 30,000 acres planted.
That's
Um,
Villard Blanc.
yeah, I mean it was huge, and then
Wow.
it plummeted,
Right. Right.
and
Huh.
and again, the thing that just fascinates me is the fact that it has nothing to do with the sensory analysis of the wines.
It was genetic prejudice.
It was prejudice. Exactly. It was genetic prejudice.
Yeah, that's amazing. uh, um,
Well, you know,
you
that that kind of thing comes easy to human beings.
yeah, indeed it does. So in your book, I think you have a chapter called "The Old Americans" or "How the Fox Conquered Europe."
Yeah.
What's that about? Because I wasn't able to get your book yet, which is rare and expensive at this point. But I'm
Wow.
working on it. I'm working on it. But
God.
I was only able to read a few sections, and that was not one that was available to me.
That's about what we were just talking about
Okay.
how some of the old Labruscoids and Burkunianas, the Black Spanish and Norton and Herbemont, were very successful in the first wave, and they were especially successful. Do you know about the Yugoslavian crash?
I mean, a little bit from your book, yeah, but that was about it.
What happened was, as the French vineyards were wiped out, the French companies went
Right.
south.
Right.
They went
Yes.
south. They went into Yugoslavia, into Greece, and so on, and planted. And of course, they planted widely and vastly, huge, vast fields. And over like a 10-year period, the viticultural area in Hungary and in Yugoslavia just boomed, and then of course it crashed,
Right.
and that led to huge migrations of people. Uh, that's where all the Slavs came to Chicago and Kansas City and worked in the meat packing industry in 1900 1905. Same in Australia.
Uh,
They were driven
wow.
they were driven out when their vineyards crashed. And what happened was they replanted with uh, with Clinton and Othello and Black Spanish and Jack Has and Hermont. So as I was saying earlier, in Greece, for example, or in Yugoslavia, you see these old, but they're not the original Catawbas and Concords and things like that. They're the more refined, more developed
Like
uh,
second generation
second
Labrusca. Yeah.
generation vinifera,
Right.
but everywhere. I mean, they are just everywhere.
Huh.
Uh, from Middle Europe on down, all the way down to Greece,
Huh.
and I understand they're in Turkey as well.
Um,
So that's
so
that's what I mean by the fox conquering.
got it. I love it. Yeah. So I think one of the other ideas I picked up from the bit of your book that I was able to read was kind of these, I wanted to ask you about this idea of pests and invasive species, and like we think about, like how phylloxera fits into that, and to what extent does the kind of viticulture, the sort of monocultural extractive type of viticulture contribute to that. If I mean, something reminds me, like I feel like I don't have it in my notes here, but I feel like something that I read that you were writing about mentioned that, made me think of that. And I've been thinking a lot about Pierce's disease,
Right.
being a California boy, and how maybe in a certain sense it's like the new phylloxera. It's once again something that vinifera are not resistant to. It's spreading, as climate change happens,
You
and
know, it's
really,
it's spreading in the olive trees in Italy.
oh wow, yeah, and
Oh,
really,
yeah.
it's like
It's
there's
moving
no
north.
stopping it other than really horrible ecological things. It's just like mass herbicide, removing like any kind of riparian
Putting
buffer zones and
yeah, buffer zone.
insect habitat, and a lot, just continual use of insecticides and things like that to kill the insect vectors that transmit it through the vineyards. And people, the only reason we have to do that is because we're so committed to vinifera, as a pure
Yeah,
vinifera, I should say.
yeah,
Genetically pure vinifera. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, because I feel like you had some great
yeah.
thoughts.
And it's. I'm looking at the olive situation,
Okay.
And the Pierce's disease was attacked by Andy Walker in an uh, old fashioned crossbreeding way using modern methods, and Andy was successful. But I tried to check it out, and I don't know what the olive people are going to do, because
Oof.
I don't know that there are any PD resistant wild olive cultivars. And it seems
Wow.
to me that the only thing they're going to be able to do is GMO, because I mean
Right.
it's going to be easy enough to insert a gene that'll fix it. But that's that's certainly preferable to the ecological damage that you're doing by these extreme measures. I mean they've got 10-kilometer wide buffer zones they're bulldozing
Wow.
across the peninsula.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it's just foolhardy to be so committed to basically it's a genetic prejudice.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only thing you can call it. It's a genetic preference, a prejudice.
Right.
Uh, and Europe is finally coming around
Right.
with the new hybrids, and some of the older hybrids are coming in on the coattails, which is good. Uh, I see that the English champagne or sparkling wine contest, the national contest in England for sparkling wine, which they're getting very good at. They've got the same chalk formations in England as there are in Champagne.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
won by a Flaval this year,
Right. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it
So
was. Yeah.
I think we're going to see nothing but invasive species from now on.
Yeah.
I mean, the Lake Champlain, for example's got several different kinds of aquatic invasive species, like eels, and uh, we've got a silvery kind of fish that's actually kind of fun, but it fights like crazy, and it tastes pretty good too. But it's wreaking havoc with lots of the other fish,
Right.
and they come in on the hulls of boats and everything like that. And so now we've got boat washing facilities at all the put-ins, which is good.
Right.
The with international travel, international shipping, and so on, the way we've got it now, we're going to have
Yeah.
nothing but invasive species.
Yeah.
There's,
Yeah.
I mean, the whole world's going to be invaded by the rest of the world.
Yeah. I mean, I, and I guess the only, there's a perspective that, that's just change. But I think the downside is the change is happening much faster than the rate of evolution and
Right. Oh,
adaptation.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is that for every invasion, there's a loss in
Right.
the local ecosystem. Like one thing has happened here is there's this, I can't think of the name of it. It's a kind of a bulrush,
Mm.
and the European one is not invasive, and the American one is not invasive. But they hybridized a few years ago, and now they're everywhere in all the ditches all along the road. I call it that shit. And so far nobody's found a use for it, although the goats like it,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
which is cool. Uh, but what it does is it outcompetes the cattails,
Right.
and cattails are really valuable edible in the ecosystem for all sorts of animals.
Right. Right. I think we can even eat the
Oh yeah,
roots
well,
and things
oh,
like that, right?
yeah, yeah. We can eat the roots are definitely edible.
Hmm.
The native Indians ate them. Indigenous people ate them. So
So
yeah,
so how do you like what I how do you how what am I looking for? And well, I'd love to hear sort of you know, your take on the contemporary what's happening or like the prejudices that still exist or however you want to address it, the perspectives on hybrids vis-a-vis pure vinifera in contemporary wine culture in this historical perspective. But you obviously have made at some point you've how to put it like the blinders were taken away at some point, and to me, it feels like I just kind of realized this the other day. So I had an interview with a guy from Bordeaux recently, and in really ecologically minded winery in Bordeaux. Everything they're doing, you name it, like they're forward thinking, ecological thinking, better than organic. But when I brought up hybrids, that genetic prejudice, like just like was a total blinder and a total disconnect. I mean, that was the amazing thing. Was just like when you think ecologically, like hybrid for me, there just
Right.
becomes a point where
Right.
hybrids are inevitable. Like you can't see the world going forward ecologically in wine without them. Like it's the only,
More
yeah,
than 50% of the pesticides in Europe are,
right.
I mean, come on, get serious.
But so the hopeful thing that I thought was like in retrospect is like it's so obvious, like to you and me, that once those blinders come off, to me it seems like that's the only hurdle, because then it just like the dominoes fall after once you get over that prejudice, and it's really
Right.
just like once you step over that threshold of prejudice, it's like a huge aha, and you're just like, oh, I see what I wasn't seeing. And I don't know if you can describe your own perspective on that, or how you would even describe what that perspective is, but I'm looking for words to be able to express it, and it's hard. Or I haven't come up with a concise way of putting that.
I don't exactly know. I can say that the the in the states now we're ready.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. The millennials are crazy open.
Yep.
They're exploratory. They're looking for new tastes.
Yeah.
And it's clear that they're more interested in exploring than they are in maintaining some traditional ideal. And to it's a very conservative stance to be prejudiced against hybrids. It's an ultimate kind of
Yep.
conservatism,
Yep.
and we just have to. What can you say? We just have to point out, one, it's foolish to be conservative in that way, and two, here, try this.
Yeah. Yep.
I wrote a paper. The last thing I wrote on the topic was a paper I wrote a few years ago called on appreciating new objects, and I gave a tasting after I read the paper with hybrid wines, and everybody was astounded. Oh, these are really good. I mean, that's the response. If you disarm people,
Right. Right.
you have to disarm them a bit. You have to
Yeah.
say, no, now just take these things as something, just take these things as a drink
Right.
and see whether you like them. See whether you enjoy drinking them. Don't say, "Is this a cab?"
Right. Right. Right.
Just say, here's a fun drink. See what you think. But make sure that what you give them is something that's fun to drink. I mean, something they don't have to think about.
Now, you've had a. I mean, if you could tell a little bit about your bona fides, that would be great. Because the question I want to ask you is like, how do you approach? Do you approach wine more as a scientist or as a philosopher? And why? And can you explain why I would ask you that?
Yeah, I approach it more as a wine drinker.
Ah,
I mean,
does that
when
mean you? What does that mean?
I enjoy wine to drink as a food. So I enjoy the I enjoy it socially. And I enjoy it aesthetically. And when I run into something interesting, then I drop into the scientific mode and ask myself what's going on here, and then I'll pull out my computer and go to Wikipedia and find out the background of the grape and the wine and things like that. But my first reaction to wine is just as a person who appreciates it as as a food.
Can you talk about some of your experience with any specific hybrids that have fascinated you over the years?
Yeah, I uh, I started out brewing beer. I learned when I was at Oxford. I somehow threw in with a group of home brewers, and so I learned how to brew beer. And when I got back to Kansas City, the local brewing store was called Wine Art. They were a chain, a national chain that started in Canada, and they did both uh, beer and wine. And so the guy who ran it said to me, he says, "You're pretty good with beer. You ever try wine?" I said, "No, I thought wine would be really complicated." He says, "No, it's way easier than beer." So I got I bought a I bought a concentrate and made some wine. I said, "Hey, this is really easy." So I bought a 5-gallon barrel that I that I kept in the shower and started making wine. And then then he said to me, he says, "There's a guy in town who's got some wine, who's got some grapes, and he was asking me if I knew anybody who made wine better than he did." And I gave him your name, so he's going to get in touch with you. And so Button Biggs got in touch with me, and it turned out he had on his 40-acre land, he had 5 rows of 10 each of 5 varieties of grapes.
Okay.
And he said, "Let me taste some of your wine." So I let him taste my wine. And he said, "Oh, you're good. So you can have those grapes." So I made wine, and I didn't want to make a Bordeaux. I always wanted to make Burgundy. So
Uh-huh.
I found out this is in Missouri, and I found out that Lucien Dressel had a winery. In fact, he was one of the very first uh, wineries in Missouri, and at Mountain Pleasant. And I called him up and I said, I want to make Burgundy. He said, "Well, you want Leon Millot?" And I said, "Oh yeah." And he says, "Yeah, Dutton's got a row of it." So I said, "Okay, I'll pay special attention to it." So I picked all the Leon Millot and I made it in my barrel, and damn,
Yeah.
that was it. So it's been me and Leon for 50 years.
Oh, that's amazing. That's great. Yeah,
No, no, I made it. My wines have been my Leons have been, and it's a blend of what Joe Cascles calls the Wagner clone and the the Foster clone. I mean, they're obviously two different varieties, but Phil Wagner sold it the one as Leon Millot, and Foster sold the other as Leon Millot. Foster's is probably the real thing,
okay.
uh, but the Wagner's is close. I think it's a Kuhlman of some sort.
Okay.
So I made a blend of them. In '83, I made a barrel for the Les Amis de Vin Club, and 20 years later, it was still being slipped into tastings, and still doing really well against very important wines. In fact, I don't know whether you've ever heard of Doug Frost.
I don't know if I have.
He was the first American to be both a master of wine and a sommelier of the world, or whatever the hell the other thing is. And
Gotcha.
Doug,
Yeah.
Doug's very open to hybrid wines,
Got it.
and he's a big time consultant, and
Okay.
he was doing a tasting in St. Louis for the industry of old Pinots and Burgundies. They had to be 20 years old or better. And so one of the guys in the industry in St. Louis had a bottle of my '83 Les Amis de Van Pinots or Leon Special, and he slipped it in. And the only wine that beat it that night was the Beaulieu George Latour Special.
Huh.
And everybody said, "We can't figure out where this wine's from, but it's a gorgeous Pinot." And Doug's looking around and he says, "Oh, I think it's from closer to home than you might think it is." I mean, he figured it out. Doug figured it out. He knew it was mine once he saw that I was sitting in the audience. So and Jeff Davies, who's another biggie in the industry, he was a dealer in Bordeaux, snuck it into a tasting in Bordeaux. Lucy Morton was there, and Jeff told me afterwards. He said there's not a taster in France who wouldn't have said that was a fine old Burgundy.
Right.
So yeah, there's Leon has enormous potential.
That's great. How does it do in the vineyard? Is it pretty hardy?
Oh yeah, it's sure it's perfectly hardy. It was perfectly hardy in Kansas City back when Kansas City used to get cold.
Wow. I mean, what about like resistance to mildews and things like that?
It gets a late season powdery
Okay.
uh, after harvest,
Oh, okay.
but that's no big deal.
Right.
Uh, I've never seen it get downy.
Okay.
It will get black rot,
Okay.
uh, both on the leaves and on the fruit. It's not terribly susceptible, but it will get it.
Yeah.
Now it's a little bit tricky. It took me a long time to realize that it's very riparian. It wants to grow long,
I gotcha.
and so you the only proper way to grow it is to four long canes with a couple of spurs.
Got it. Yeah. Let it stretch out,
Let it
basically.
stretch out. Yeah.
Yeah. I hear the same with Baco because it's
Oh yeah,
like
it's exactly the same as Baco. Yeah,
yeah.
right. And you can't overcrop it.
Right. Yeah, that also sounds like Baco. um, that's amazing. Nice. Yeah. I mean the anything else? Like, did you work with any other Leon? It's funny. I just had my first Leon here in the Finger Lakes, and it is a lovely. I mean, the version I had was lovely. Um, and at the conference in California, I know that there's a Leon coming from Oregon. It's one of the
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, the Oregon ones are a little richer.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, I bet. Yeah.
I don't think it gets cold enough in Oregon.
Okay. Oh, you
Uh,
mean you want it to be a leaner, like
yeah,
more, like a more
right.
Burgundian
Yeah,
style of wine?
yeah,
Got it. It shines in that.
yeah.
Okay. Well, this winemaker definitely that I have a feeling that's their style. So maybe they've figured out some tricks with it. We'll see. I mean, it's
Oh, it'll still be excellent.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's amazing. So yeah, I mean, that's so sorry. I asked like, was there any other varieties that maybe were runners up for you, or that you've
Oh,
fallen
Villard
in love
Blanc.
with?
I love Villard Blanc.
Oh,
Now
okay.
we grew it on really thin soil over limestone, which is what it really likes because it's the Berlandi area is big in it,
Got it.
and it was mine. It was very chablis, very stony,
Oh,
uh,
nice. Huh.
and I finished it in Hungarian oak, and it was just marvelous. I took a medal at the state fair with it, and
How
it's a gosh, it's a gorgeous vine.
I
I mean,
hear it. Does it It's
have
have a little Pierce's resistance? Am I wrong about that?
I think it does. I think it has a little bit.
Because of
Uh,
the Berlandieri?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Uh, I'll tell you who's growing it now is what's his name in Tennessee, and he's got a really good winemaker, and he sent me a bottle 2 years, two seasons ago of his VB, and it's dynamite. It's just dynamite.
Fantastic.
No, it's really nice wine. I think if well, you've probably heard me say this on the web, but I think California should have pulled out all the whites in the Central Valley and planted VB, and they would have been miles ahead.
Yeah. I mean, this is exactly why I want to do this conference in California. I feel like California is like falling behind like the rest of the world because it's so easy to grow vinifera there. It's just it has stagnated. It's like it
Right,
just hasn't been forward looking. And now, yeah. I mean that and the forces that control the majority of wine there are these massive like global market forces
right,
rather
yeah.
than, craft wine
Well,
forces.
much more interesting things going on elsewhere.
Yep. Yep.
Finger Lakes, for example, there's wonderful stuff going on in the Finger Lakes.
Yeah, yeah. Yes. No self-serving comment on my part.
Yeah.
um, so, so I have some fun questions for you here. Is world agriculture doomed to over-extraction, global distribution of pests, dependence on petroleum products and homogenous mega markets, and damaging short-term investment goals legalized in corporate codes.
Yes.
Yes.
Cliff. Is that from Cliff?
That's from Cliff, yeah. And have grapes helped humanity in any meaningful way?
Oh, yeah.
How would you, what ways?
Human beings need an intoxicant.
Go on.
I mean, what? I'm going to make an analogy. What's the first thing they do that rose to popularity on the internet? Pornography.
Right.
What's the first thing people do when they find a new thing? They get an intoxicant. Human life is hard.
Yep.
And wine is a way to make human life easier.
At least momentarily, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's something to look forward to. And I mean,
Right.
it really, I've heard people say that it's God's gift, and it is.
Yep.
If God didn't want us to have it, He wouldn't have given it to us. That strikes me as a good argument.
I mean, you could say that about some bad things too.
Oh yeah. Well, then you use the soul builder argument.
Well, it's funny. I've recently read 2 books back to back. One was about the history of intoxicants as maybe the origin of religion, and the other it was just the history of alcohol as the foundation of civilization. And yeah, and it's called the first one. Shoot, I wish I could remember it. I recommended it on the podcast. I'll have to look back. But the one about how alcohol played a key role in the history of civilization is called Drunk. But it's funny. I was talking to a guest that I was entertaining and mentioned this book, and how like this book played off of the fact that there are costs to alcohol, but for some reason we've kept it as part of our life, or many cultures have kept it. A majority of cultures, only a few cultures around the planet that sort of have eschewed alcohol historically and still do. Notably, like the native cultures of where we live here in North America. But his like off the cuff comment that I thought was so smart. He was like, well, maybe it passed down through genetics because so many people have sex after drinking together, And I was like, yeah, that's actually like a great point.
That's good. Yeah.
So science. here's the final one from Cliff. I have to ask this because it's such a great question. Science tells us who, what, where, when, and how, but why does this human system exist as it does, and why is the universe? As Frank Zappa asked in The Adventures of Gregory Peccary, does it matter that this waste of time is what makes a life for you? Are we just biogenic detritus produced by entropy in a hydrous organic system at moderate temperatures and pressures?
Sure. What else?
I know. I love that question.
Yeah. Cliff's a hoot. Have you ever met him?
Not in person, no. Only via email. No. But I am growing a couple of his grapes here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He sent a couple cuttings. So
I got a couple of them too. I got to go out and see that. This was their first year. I got to go out and see how they did.
Yeah, me too. I think I can't even tell right now how anything did. We had like that 2-month drought, and all the babies. I don't know. I hope some of them made it. That's all I can say.
Sure.
All right. Well, any closing comments? Like any thoughts for those who are new to wine and are exploring hybrids and anything else?
Well, I think as we noted earlier, hybrids are definitely the future. There's just no way around that. And they're fun. They make good wine, and do not, under any circumstances, ever be ashamed of loving them.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate this, George.
I enjoyed it.
Me too. Hey, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you joining in to these podcasts. If you'd like to support these podcasts, probably the best way to do that is to just join Substack as a paid subscriber at beyondorganicwine.substack.com. It also gives you access to all the paid episodes and other content that I will be releasing on Substack. And I also want to thank Colden Pro for this beautiful closing music.